What are the symptoms of ADHD? Most kids could be described some point as inattentive, impulsive or hyperactive. Explanations for this behavior vary widely, ranging from the child being overtired to overexcited. However, when such behavior lasts for significant periods of time and when it interferes with life at school and at home, the explanation may be due to a condition such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD. Some studies suggest that about 2% of primary school-age children have ADHD, while others have suggested that almost 80% have ADHD. However, the majority of researchers put the figure at between 5% and 10%. Regarding gender, boys are at least 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than girls. Prenatal risks. Some studies have shown a possible increase in risk among children whose mothers used cigarettes or alcohol during pregnancy. Therefore, if you are pregnant, do not smoke or use alcohol. Environmental toxins exposure to very high levels of lead before age 6 or so will also raise a child's risk. Some young children are exposed to lead from the dust of worn paint in many old buildings or from drinking water that has traveled through lead pipes. Family history. Having a biological parent or sibling with ADHD seems to raise a child's chances of developing it. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, at least 1/3 of fathers still have ADHD in the youth may have a child with ADHD. Some children who have ADHD some foods, such as sugar and food coloring. These seem to trigger more out-of-control behavior, but food is not a trigger for many children with ADHD. Being at a party often triggers out-of-control behavior, which might be due to foods, but the behavior is more likely to be due to too much excitement. Sleep apnea. Blocking of the airway during sleep is linked to problem behaviors in many children. Some research has shown that about 30% of children who have ADHD have some sleep apnea. Signs of sleep apnea includes snoring, often love story, and stopping breathing for a brief time during sleep. Not all children who snore have sleep apnea, but if a child with ADHD also snores, this might be problem. At least 40 years of research worldwide. There is still no clear explanation for why ADHD happens in some children. More recent theories suggest that there is a problem with how the front part of the brain works. This causes the child's brain to deal with information and feelings in a different way. For both children, it is comprised of 3 called symptom categories, which are hyperactivity, poor concentration, and impulses. In order to reach an accurate diagnosis, the presence and pattern of development of symptoms in each of these categories must be considered. Hyperactivity children always seem to be on the go or constantly emotion. Hyperactive behavior may be demonstrated by a difficulty in playing quietly, excessive fidgeting, continuous talking, restlessness, inability to sit still when required, all concentration. Children have a hard time keeping in mind that any one thing and make quickly become for the task science. That charms inattentive include disorganization, poor academic performance, being distracted easily, forgetfulness, losing things and poor completion of tasks. Impulsiveness. Children seem unable to curb their immediate reactions or think before they act. Impulsive behavior may be identified through disruptive behaviors in the classroom, such as interrupting our children for turn-taking, blurting out answers before they are appropriate, rejection by their peers or classmates, as well as accidental injury. How ADHD can affect your people. People are very ADHD, may not do as well at school as they are capable of, because it is so hard to concentrate and stay still. In addition, schoolwork gets harder as you get older, and it may become more and more difficult to keep up with the work. Furthermore, if no one knows they have ADHD, it may mean that they do not get the special help they need. As they get older, they are expected to take more responsibility for their own learning and behavior and to be more organized in order to do this. This can be hard with ADHD for young people who are not able to plan and organize themselves. For example, They don't hear the teacher's instructions. They lose assignments at home. School gets very difficult. This to myself and pull box being kept back in lower grades, lower self-esteem. And confidence has worked as well as regular. Next topic is malnutrition. Most worse skewed hunger and malnutrition because not in conflicts and natural disasters, but in the annual hunger season. This is the time of year that is characterized by a lack of stored food from last year's harvest, high food prices, and lack of jobs. Nearly 7 out of 10 hungry people in the world, or about 600 million in total, are either landless rural Abrus or members of small farm households. Many of these 600 million people live in areas where water or temperature constraints allow only one crop harvest per year. Their poverty is driven by seasonal cycles worsening, especially in the pre-harvest month during this hunger season period. Castle stocks from the last harvest begin to run out. This is due to low production levels, inadequate storage facilities, and accumulated debt. These factors all combined to force families to sell or consume their agricultural production. Well, before the harvest in many poor rural communities, the majority of families are affected. So mutual support networks are undermined, and because of general shortages of food supply at the local economy level, food prices on the open market increased considerably during the hunger season. These families are trapped in a hunger pattern that occurs every year at the same time. Labor markets are flooded with hungry families, who come to town seeking work. Even for those lucky enough to find employment, wages alone and working for wages to obtain food for immediate needs forces the farmers to neglect their own farm, which in turn will compromise future harvests. The net result is that households are forced to reduce the diversity and quantity of food they consume, setting the stage for macro and micronutrient deficiencies. In addition to further compound the problems pre-harvest, hunger season is also often the rainy season, a time when malaria, diarrhea, and other illnesses strike. The psychological effects. These struggles are profound. These family members often experience elevated levels of anxiety and stress in the hunger seas. Women are especially affected as their responsibilities often include both earning an income and for infants and children. In summary, the combination of all these challenges at specific times of year generates seasonal patterns of hunger and undernutrition. However, I'd like to say that seasonal hunger is not inevitable. Governments across the world have experimented with a wide variety of policies that have proven successful in combating seasonal hunger. 3 important strategies that have been designed to reduce suffering and help families. Our emergency assistance measures, which are targeted at people who are suffering from severe or acute hunger and those that need immediate help. A second strategy is a social protection safety net, which attempts to prevent vulnerable families from falling into hunger. This is done by providing a mixture of food price regulation, employment opportunities, and nutrition programs. Finally, rural livelihood development interventions focus on improving productivity through better access to productive inputs, such as fertilizers and water. The community-based management of acute malnutrition approach, also known as CMM, is revolutionizing the treatment of severe acute malnutrition among preschool children. Most severe acute malnutrition, a condition which can kill in weeks if not treated, occurs not in emergency situations of conflict and natural disaster, as one might think, but rather in context of extreme poverty, and particularly during the annual hunger season in rural areas. Traditionally, children suffering from severe acute malnutrition have often been treated in hospital-type, inpatient settings. However, very high per-patient costs and staffing needs under this approach, as well as a lack of appropriate and modern facilities in many rural areas, mean that only a limited number of undernourished children are fortunate enough to receive this treatment. The CMM approach addresses these issues by mobilizing communities themselves with the assistance of frontline health workers to identify and treat the 80% or so of severely and acutely undernourished children who do not have other illnesses or complications. The use of easy-to-administer therapeutic foods, such as nutrient-dense ready-to-use foods, make this community-based strategy affordable. Meanwhile, inpatient care in therapeutic feeding centers can concentrate on the remaining 20% of undernourished